right, good afternoon and welcome everybody. We're going to have an interesting session today about platforms and IoT platforms in particular. We'll touch on a number of different dimensions. We'll touch on digital transformation. We'll touch on various levels of platforms. We'll touch on standards. So we'll cover a lot of ground here, so welcome. So let me get started here. So why are we talking about all these changes? We're talking about digitization and digital transformation and doing things differently and changing our business models. Why? And the fundamental reason is it's fun to play with technology. No. It's because the existing systems that we're using today, they impose some limits on what we can do and where we can go. So we've got disconnected systems and rigid reporting conventions and a lot of offline analysis with spreadsheets and similar tools. And it just adds up to a lot of delays. So, if we manage to get some insights from our data, it takes us a while to figure all that out and to react and do something with it. So we know, and there are a lot of disruptive technologies that are coming on board that are not only interesting, but potentially game changers for us. So when we look at digitization and try to think through what kinds of problems are people tackling with this, well, we start a little bit with some of the technologies, and this is sort of some of the big ones, the IoT, cloud, and analytics and applications and machine learning and such things. Cybersecurity is a big factor. And then there's the IoT edge and connectivity and all that dimension. But that's just the technology piece. It's what are people thinking about, or what are they changing? What are they trying to do with that? So we've identified a number of areas where we're seeing this kind of transformation opportunity. And it's the one we kind of start with because a lot of folks we deal with are working here already, and that's the smart operate and maintain space, asset performance management and operations performance management. How do you run those plants more efficiently? There's also an important area in the design and smart design area. Your product and your plant and your building and your infrastructure. All these things, need to be rethought a little bit in this day when all of those things are being impacted by IoT and digitization. It has a big impact across the supply chain as well. For direct parts and indirect parts, spare parts and supplies and components for your products. So there's a big dimension there and a lot of activity. The products themselves are getting smarter, so that's a really dynamic area for everybody right now. All this technology is enabling us to rethink the kinds of services we offer, from basic monitoring to many other things. And at the end of the day, you have to bring your whole enterprise and your whole business together and transform your business processes in order to take maximum advantage of some of these new digitization technologies. So I'm just going to touch on quickly some of the areas that we're seeing, some of the technology areas that we're seeing, sort of undergird this whole digital transformation space. And the first one, and probably still the most popular one that we hear about most and get most requests about is the whole area of artificial intelligence and machine learning and cognitive computing. Because, with some predictive stuff, you can do a lot better in the areas of maintenance and operations and supply chain and design. So there's that. But we're also seeing that it's the underlying technology that's powering a lot of other transformative technologies autonomous vehicles and machines, remote sensing, voice interface, augmented reality, and personalized apps. So we're seeing a lot of, it's everywhere, and that's only going to continue. In the additive manufacturing space, it's another dimension of digitization. And it looks like at some point, not today, but not that far off, it could be the biggest disruptor to hit discrete manufacturing in a long time. And I say here that it could make decades of tribal knowledge obsolete. And what I mean is that the way we manufacture things is going to change so radically that the folks who know what to tweak when things go wrong won't know, because it's different. It's all going to be different. And we're having immersive augmented reality. It's going to be standard practice for assembly and many maintenance operations. So we're seeing that coming on strong. There's been a big push for the last several years in the area of asset performance management. And so we're seeing that companies can improve their operations by keeping their machines running at a high level, and then coordinating their operation of those machines with, with production needs. So that's been big and continues to be big, and a lot of our clients are asking us about that. We think one of the next big transformations in that space is going to be to optimize the operations a little more directly and dynamically to respond to and interact with the business systems and the customers' needs, and be more responsive as well. So we're starting to see a move in that direction. So it's an interesting time because so many different things are changing all at once. Powering a lot of that change is the edge connectivity. It's driving a lot of this industrial transformation. So the more we see and the more we can connect and harvest some data, then the more we can apply that artificial intelligence and do something useful with it. We're seeing a growth in the area of asset integrity management. So it's one thing to monitor the pump or the compressor and know how that's performing, but it's also an important thing to manage the oil platform and make sure that it's not drifting off of its pipeline and causing some damage. So keeping the big picture, asset integrity is another area here. Blockchain is getting a lot of news, a lot of headlines. It's a promising area. We haven't quite seen it making a contribution yet, but it looks like it will, and it looks like there are some techniques that are going to be used to make that usable in the manufacturing space and throughout the supply chain. So that's coming. Then we talk about IoT and machine tools, and we're seeing platforms crop up within that ecosystem quite a bit as well. So it starts with connectivity, but then sharing the data and doing something useful with the data is right behind it. So this is another area that we hadn't expected to be quite on the leading edge, but it's turning out to be. There's a lot of advances in the area of robotics, which we touched on, and the notion of smarter, safer robots working with people or alongside people is becoming reality. In this public sector, there are huge opportunities in the smart cities space, enabled by all these technologies as well. So we're doing a lot more research at ARC into that area as well. Includes things like building information modeling, new ways to keep track of that transition and to just model the buildings and drive out cost and drive up efficiencies. In the power area, there are huge changes taking place. You saw maybe the keynote area this morning talking about just some of those things. And again, it's driven in large part by the possibilities that are created by all the new technologies. Same in rail. more and more rail operators are moving in this direction of using IoT solutions of some kind or other for some of their advanced asset management and controls. A popular theme is the digital twin. I know several of our sponsors here at the event are talking about a digital twin. You should talk to them to find out how their digital twin is different or better or worse than their competitors, but there are a lot of digital twins and a lot of concepts about what that is. And it's an important concept. I don't mean to make light of it. It's, but is it a design thing, or is it an asset thing, or is it a supply chain thing, or is it all of the above? A data thing? It's all of those, probably. So I alluded to it earlier, IoT requires a new design paradigm because we're thinking about putting some compute and connectivity and some smarts inside of our edge devices and all of our devices. So that's a big change. So then we get on to the rest of the story. Well, we touched on platforms a little bit. We talked about transformation. But if I were to talk about an IoT solution, what is that? What does that mean? Here we are. So there are a number of different dimensions that you could identify. And when we talk to companies that tell us they're an IoT solution of some kind or other, we see a variety of different kind of functionalities that they include in their solution. Excuse me. So many of them are edge device or middleware or application platform folks. I'm having a little trouble advancing here. Some are network communications, have network communications functionality. Connected product solutions are an important part of the story. Analytics and algorithms, this is another solution piece. Right alongside of that is a rules engine, typically to do something once you've figured out what your analytics are telling you. There's a cloud infrastructure component that many solutions have. There's some edge or gateway hardware, so some IoT solutions include that kind of edge or gateway hardware as a core part of what they offer. And some have, sort of canned applications that they offer on, along with the rest of their functionality as well. So there's a big mix of folks that we see that are doing these kinds of things. So when it comes to what's an IoT solution, it's a wide open field. I took a stab at just with a handful of selected suppliers and mapped those functions out on a chart like this, just to see what it looked like. The trouble I ran into right away is this is a very dynamic space. And as soon as you finish the chart, you have to start editing the chart, so it's probably a little out of date already. But it's still not, it's a useful way to think about what are these two guys doing and where might they go next. So, excuse me. So I think Andy had this slide up this morning. When we talked about platforms not so long ago, we were really talking about significant applications that we're using. But we're moving on. We're moving to modern platforms now. I think many of you probably saw these this morning, so I won't dive too deeply on any of these things. But the point is, we talked about IoT solutions. Now I want to talk about IoT platforms. And when people, in that category, when people approach us, it's typically these four groups of things. It's the device connectivity platform, the compute platform, the cloud application platform, and and an analytics platform. So these are the ones normally folks refer to as IoT platforms of one kind or another. And, you know, we saw this morning about the IoT edge. This is kind of an early generation. It's an idea of connecting to the device, the edge devices to the cloud. So that's the first piece. Then there's the analytics piece. This is sort of at the top end of the stack, typically. And there are a lot of competitors in this space. There's the underlying cloud computing platform, the infrastructure as a service platform. And you all know these players. In the industrial space, you know, we see probably these players in one form or another. Google a little bit less. There may be a few others, but these are the main ones we see. And then the platform as a service is where it seems like there's a lot of confusion. So maybe I will spend a couple of minutes on that. Some of the big cloud application platform players are, you know, GE predicts, an SAP cloud platform, and Siemens MindSphere. But some of the infrastructure players like Amazon and Microsoft also, you know, have some services available that make their, you know, sort of ride on top and come along with their IaaS platform that allow many of the same kinds of functionality. So it's another option. So to try to sort this out, we came up with a what we call our IoT platform, IoT edge model. So when we're looking at a cloud application platform with IoT services, we've defined it like this. It's a platform as a service, so it runs on top of a compute platform like an IaaS. It includes some core services, usually some third-party services and some analytics and data services, as well as some IoT or edge connectivity services. So at the sort of cloud level, if you will, we see that basic structure. And that's used by vendors to build their own applications and run them. It's also used as an ecosystem for partners, so they can develop their own applications and run them, or, you know, in many cases, sell them through some kind of a store or something like that. And the users can use these platforms as well, so the users can run their own applications in the same environment. So that's the platform, cloud side. The edge side, you know, starts with the edge devices and systems, some of which will have embedded compute and communications things, and some of which will go through an industrial control system or a building automation system or some other kind of software. And you know, there's a network in the picture to pull the data out of those things and make it available. And then, you know, we talked about the device level platform, which you see at the top far right of that screen. But in existing plants, a lot of times you'll see the folks get started with some kind of historian or plant connector or manufacturing intelligence system or something like that to pull out the data and feed it to the cloud edge input system. So that breaks down into two main kinds of platform types that we've identified. It's the kind of the operating system type. So this is a place where, you know, the expectation is that we're going to build applications and deploy them and run them here. And then the solution portfolio type, which means that we're going to run on an infrastructure platform, and we're going to try to offer our customers solution suites of software that meet their needs. So those are the two fundamental models that we're seeing people using in the space right now. And then, you know, just a quick summary slide, that all comes together as, you know, at least 5 different kinds of platforms that we're talking about that in many cases will coexist with each other. So just to, sort of complicate our lives a little bit, platforms are platforms, but, there's a lot of platforms. Still, if you're thinking about moving into this kind of space, you can compare it. If you've got a platform in place, then do you really need to think about getting a big monolithic software solution next time you're upgrading a plant? Because those things, they tend to be one size fits all. Yes, configurable, but still, they can be costly. That you may need some hardware to support them. They might have a pretty lengthy installation process. And even then, you need to customize them frequently to get them to fit exactly what you need. And then you have to rely on the traditionally long update cycles for many of these systems. So that's one option. But if you've got a platform, then there are off-the-shelf apps in that platform. But you also can build apps that pretty closely fit your needs. So we're starting to see some folks who are taking that step and saying, this is the way to go, because I don't really need that full-blown MES system or whatever, but I'm just going to need this little bit of connectivity, and I've got a microservice that does that. So it can be adapted quickly and can support innovation. So, there are pros and cons, but, we're starting to see a little bit of a swing in that direction. So another slide Andy referenced this morning is the sort of convergence of a couple of open architecture, open standards that we're seeing in the industry. And if I look at that, that operations platform piece, it's really it's an on-premise, probably a cloud-based infrastructure for critical services and applications. So it's a little bit of a rethinking of the way that we might do a DCS, for example. And what's interesting to me is that those things are running on standard hardware, and it's got some industrial-grade networking in the picture, some real-time high-performance cloud solutions, virtualized compute and storage. In other words, it's bringing the IT, the solutions and the technologies that have been sort of developed in the IT world and bringing them really down into the heart of the OT world. So how does that picture fit with our IoT platform and IoT edge model? Well, here's the way I conceptualize that. So the IoT edge part of our model has kind of a control and automation half, which maps pretty nicely to this picture on the left. And then it's got some other stuff, some other connected devices. And these are a little bit of a mystery for that model on the left. You kind of map it to the monitoring and optimization box there, but arguably that box probably doesn't belong inside that thing, but that's another story. But what do you do with things like smart badges that don't need to go through the control system, or smart tools, or autonomous machines, or augmented reality goggles, or vision systems, and tablets, and scanners, and all the other things we've been hearing about at this conference? And they're not a natural fit in that sort of controls architecture model. And so this is another way of talking about how we're seeing, those things are showing up, as machines with some embedded intelligence and computing and communications, going through a gateway typically to an IoT, oftentimes to one of the IoT device level platforms that I talked about earlier, and then up to a cloud application platform. So yeah, maybe you could argue that some of that's already in the model on the left. Maybe it is. But what they haven't talked about much is a piece of this device level platform that, does validation. Is this machine or is this device really supposed to be on my network? Am I allowed to talk to it? You know, do I want to let it in? So there's that sort of thing. And then there's the application deployment. So maybe I'm going to put a new app. Maybe I've written a new app in my, you know, at the platform level, and I want to deploy that to the edge. You know, we see that in this space. We haven't seen that much in the controls and automation space, but eventually I think we will. So then, you know, some of you may recognize this kind of three-dimensional globe model that we've been using here at ARC for a while. And, you know, we just took and mapped some of the emerging platforms that we're seeing. And, you know, as you might expect, all the different areas are thinking about improvements, because this is one of the characteristics of digital transformation is you can improve not only your operations, but your supply chain and design and all kinds of things. So naturally, we're seeing folks thinking about how to apply platforms in this space. But one thing that's common is that most of these new platforms that we're hearing about and that are being deployed, you know, are moving towards a common IT technologies underneath. Not identical, but, you know, similar, and those that have been pioneered in the IT space. So let's just see. So I'm going to kind of move through this quickly. You know, so we're recommending to our clients about how they can move along their digital transformation journey. And it starts with the technologies, but it really, you know, focuses on people and managing change and identifying the business value and trying to go for it. And then, you know, I like to close with this slide because we are in the midst of what I call the great digitization of industry. And we're reinventing every aspect of every industrial sector in every way. So it's a fun time. And with that, I'm going to close, and thank you very much.